If you're watching this, then I failed. Not just to stop it, but to remain human. The book, it's not fiction, it's alive. It breathes through us. Chapter 1 isn't a warning, it's a trapdoor. Before we begin, subscribe only if you're ready to question what's real. Let me know where you're watching from, especially if you've had unusual dreams lately. Now, turn off the lights. And whatever you do, don't read along. Let's decode Chapter 1 of the Necronomicon. It started with dust. Not the kind that settles from neglect, but the sort that feels warm to the touch and pulses ever so slightly like breathing soil. I found it in the basement of a condemned church in Arkham, behind a bricked-up alcove I wasn't meant to find. The wall crumbled easier than it should have, like it wanted to be opened. Behind it sat a small metallic chest. Not ornate, not ancient, just wrong in a way I couldn't define. When it finally gave way, I felt something exhale. Inside was a book, bound in what felt like skin, though it rippled like fluid. Chains looped around it thick, ancient ones, but when I touched them, my fingers came away red. I swear to you, they bled. Not my hands, the chains. To look beyond the veil is to burn the eyes of your soul. I should have left it, but curiosity is the oldest trap, and I was already caught. I took the book home that night, wrapped it in cloth, didn't even tell the others on my research team. My dreams were strange eyes, but what really unnerved me was how warm the cloth remained, like it had a pulse. The next morning, every mirror in my apartment was slightly fogged. No heat, no steam, just a fine mist like something breathing on the other side of the glass. I documented the book as best I could. It had no title, just an embossed spiral of glyphs on the cover, which twisted slightly when you weren't looking. Each page seemed to be made of translucent parchment fibrous, but unnaturally flexible. I noticed something else too. The book resisted light. No matter how much I turned the lamp up, the pages always seemed dim, like the ink absorbed photons. And then came the whisper. It didn't have a source. It wasn't a sound I heard, more like something my spine interpreted, like language in the marrow. At first I assumed it was the heater kicking in. But when I turned everything off, it got louder. It spoke in fragments. Not words. Symbols. Concepts. Return, circle I, open, consume. I felt sick. In 2015, NASA satellites picked up a 17-second burst of infrasound from deep under Antarctica never explained. I recorded it, played it back, but there was nothing, just static. My ears, however, heard it plainly. That's when I realized I hadn't played it aloud. I'd only thought I did. There was one more detail. When I flipped to what I thought was the first page, it was blank. But under infrared, faint symbols began to emerge like invisible ink reacting to heat. I used an old forensic lamp to reveal the script. The moment the light hit it, the room shifted. Not visibly, but in weight. My ears popped like I'd changed altitude. My plants bent toward the book, and my vision distorted, edges curling inward like a fisheye lens. It felt like I had opened something that wasn't meant to be touched. Not metaphorically, literally. Some historians believe the Necronomicon is not a book, but a linguistic virus embedded within collective human consciousness. That night, the whisper didn't stop. It got closer. The first glyph on the page resembled an Ouroboros made of interlocked vertebrae. I traced it with my gloved finger, though later, I couldn't remember putting gloves on. As I stared, the symbol seemed to quiver slightly. Then, it moved. Just a twitch, like a sleeping insect. And when I blinked, it had changed position. I thought I was hallucinating, but then I checked the footage. I had a camera running the entire time, pointed directly at the book. I scrubbed back to the moment I remembered first seeing the second glyph. On the footage, it wasn't there. Not distorted, not glitched, just blank. To inscribe truth in flesh is to welcome the infection of knowing. I took screenshots, ran digital analysis. No anomalies, no compression errors. Yet, I knew I had seen it. I kept staring at the page, and slowly, the script began to arrange itself into English not through translation, but as if it was rewriting itself based on what I would understand. The text read, "The gate lies within the reader. Reading is recursion. Recursion is descent." Each word slid through my vision like oil through glass. The lines rearranged again as I read them aloud. Behind me, the lights flickered. One bulb cracked. I heard a distant cough. I was alone. In 2008, Russian cosmonaut Sergei Vostok reported seeing a wordless manuscript inside his helmet visor that glowed with reversed sunlight. It was never explained. By the third paragraph, I noticed the language had begun shifting into diagrammatic form symbols, bleeding from the edges of letters, merging into tentacular sigils. I reached for my journal to sketch the transition, but when I looked back, the text was normal again. Normal, but wrong. It was now addressing me directly. "Why do you keep looking, archivist?" I closed the book. Or tried to. My hands didn't move. No, they refused. It was like my body was being rerouted. Signals diverted. I had the desire to move, but no execution. Instead, I watched as my fingers flipped the page again. Another line. "We must speak through you, for we are not allowed entry." I whispered the phrase aloud. The air in the room thickened. Then, a sound. Like a wet mouth opening behind me. I turned too fast. My neck popped, but there was no one. Nothing. Except a smell, charcoal, blood, and ozone. I vomited. I hadn't eaten in 14 hours, but I vomited anyway. Thick black fluid, sticky and hot. It didn't stop moving. It slithered across the floor, forming shapessigils from the page. My phone started vibrating violently. When I picked it up, it had only one notification. From my weather app. It read, "Gate pressure rising. Do not breathe the third syllable." I don't have any app that would ever send something like that. I turned the phone off. It turned itself back on. The screen pulsed an eye-opening, then closing. I tried deleting the photo of the page I took earlier. The file wouldn't delete. It wasn't just locked, it had duplicated. Over 400 times. Each copy had a slightly different file name. Some contained characters I couldn't type on my keyboard. One of them was titled simply, "U." Some folklorists argue that certain alphabets like the Voynich manuscripta are not written languages but mimetic gateways to non-human cognition. The pages no longer felt like paper. They pulsed, faintly. I leaned in, and then the lines moved again. Not into English, but into something I couldn't even see. Not really, but I felt it. In the marrow. They weren't words. They were permissions. And I'd already spoken two of them aloud. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the hallway outside my apartment changed. It was subtle at first, the lights dimmer, the carpet slightly darker, a scent like burnt cinnamon in the air. I stepped out, still clutching the book beneath my arm. My neighbor's door units 5A, 5B, 5 square, all gone. In their place was a long corridor that should not have existed. I lived at the end of the building. There was no space for a hallway. But it was there. The air felt thick, not humid viscous. Breathing through it was like pulling liquid into my lungs. My phone lost signal, my watch stopped ticking. My shadow stretched forward no matter where I stood. To pass through the gate is to become both key and wound. I tried walking backward, retracing my steps. But my feet didn't land where they should. Each step left a faint echo of delay between action and consequence. The door back to my apartment was gone. The hallway groaned. Yes, groaned. From beneath the floorboards, a vibration started. Not mechanical, not structural, organic. A deep, wet pulse, like something enormous breathing far below. Then came the hum subsonic at first, but rising until it set my teeth on edge. I ran, down the corridor. no end in sight. The lights above me flickered rhythmically, in patterns that almost seemed like language. In 1973, a maintenance worker in the Paris catacombs documented a corridor that looped endlessly, and reconfigured behind him. He escaped after 5 days, but every mirror he looked into afterward showed him as facing away. The corridor turned. I didn't remember turning. It just bent around me, and that's when I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, a doorway. Not like a door made by human hands. It was tall, narrow, curved, made of slick black stone veined with gold and something that shimmered like oil. There were no hinges, no knob, only a symbol etched into the center. 3 concentric circles with a single slit running vertically through them. It looked like an eye that refused to blink. The whisper returned. Not behind me this time, but inside my skull. Third permission acknowledged. The reader approaches. I reached for the symbol. Not with intent, my hand moved on its own. The moment my fingertips brushed the surface, the material rippled. Not like stone, not like metal, but like skin. It opened. No creak, no sound, just release. Inside was darkness. True, sucking void. But the moment I crossed the threshold, I was elsewhere. Not transported, unwritten. There were no stars, no ground, only vibration. I couldn't see the book anymore, but I could feel it pressed against my chest, pulsing in sync with a rhythm that wasn't mine. And then the voice spoke not in English, not in sound. It used everything. It asked one question: will you host the key? I couldn't answer, not with words. So I opened my arms. That was enough. Researchers at the CERN facility once noted an unexplained anomaly in which instruments detected a massless corridor 12 meters long, appearing in readings for only 0.003 seconds. Its theoretical depth was infinite. My body dropped. I wasn't falling. I was being unknotted, unwoven. My name no longer sat right in my mouth. My memories began to reorder themselves. Childhood happened in reverse. Faces I didn't recognize filled my mind, whispering in languages I never studied but somehow remembered. The door slammed shut behind me. Not physically, conceptually. I was no longer in the world. I was somewhere underneath it. That night, or what I thought was night, I woke up gasping, soaked in sweat that smelled like old coins and burnt rosemary. My body trembled, not from fear, but from something closer to withdrawal. The book lay beside me, open to a page I didn't remember turning. On it, a single black glyph pulsing faintly with red glow. I closed my eyes, and the dreams returned. Only this time, they weren't mine. I stood in a temple built of bone, beneath a sky that bled sideways. Around me were figures draped in silence, hooded, faceless, yet watching with the full weight of stars. My body felt borrowed. My breath came in short, ritualized bursts, like I was following a code I hadn't learned but somehow obeyed. Then I heard it. Not a voice but a geometry. Words bent into impossible angles, folding space inside my skull. It didn't say anything. It restructured me. Each sound was a renovation of thought. It carved paths in my brain I never had before. And behind every word was a presence, something watching me through the folds of my own understanding. The dreamer is not you. I awoke with a scream lodged in my throat that I hadn't realized I was holding. To dream through another's mind is to fracture your own into mirrors that lie. My skin was cold, but the room was hot sweltering. Every surface was wet. The walls since bare were covered in writing. It was my handwriting, but I didn't remember writing it. Symbols, warnings, coordinates. One phrase repeated dozens of times. If it dreams of you, you are already becoming it. I pulled out my phone. The camera worked, but only in reverse. My selfie camera was locked on, showing a mirror that wasn't there. In the reflection behind me was a door, black and rippling. I turned around. Nothing. But when I blinked, I saw it again closer. I stopped blinking. In 2006, an artist named Aaron Bevel recorded 12 successive dreams over 12 nights that described a consistent landscape not from this world. Each dream contained a being described as a child made of horizon. She vanished on the 13th night. I didn't sleep after that, but I still dreamed. I'd close my eyes and see the same temple, the same sky, but now the robed figures stood closer. One of them raised its hand, and I saw my face beneath the hood, but aged, cracked, translucent, and smiling. I tore the book from under my pillow and hurled it against the wall. It didn't hit the floor. It hovered just slightly and then dropped with a sound like a heartbeat slowing down. I went to my laptop to type everything down, but the screen had already begun recording. My hands typed, unbidden. Chapter 1. The dream remembers the dreamer. And then, something impossible. A knock. From inside the wall behind me. Not on the door. Inside the wall. Slow, deliberate. 3 taps. Then silence. Then, you brought us through. Some theoretical physicists have postulated that consciousness may be non-localized, acting more like a broadcast than an emergent property. If that's true, certain entities could tune into our minds like a radio. The camera on my laptop flicked on by itself. The green light glowed, and in the preview window, I saw my reflection smiling. I wasn't. I tried to leave. Not metaphorically, I mean I walked to the door, turned the knob, and pulled. But it wouldn't open. There was no lock. No latch, nothing stopping me, except the air itself. Like the space around the doorway had become thicker, refusing to let me pass. I pressed my palm to the wood and felt warmth, not like sunlight, but body heat, pulsing from the other side. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The book had slid across the floor toward me, its pages fluttering open of their own accord. Page 13, though, the numbering had vanished. And there, my name. Not handwritten, not scrawled, typeset, embedded into the text like it had always been there. To be named in the tongue of the book is to cease being a reader and become an invitation. I turned to the mirror and watched my reflection blink twice as I stood still. In 2019, security footage from a metro station in Osaka captured a woman standing motionless for over 4 hours. Yet in the mirrored pillar beside her, she shifted positions constantly. The footage was confiscated. My reflection began to drift, only a few centimeters thin more. Its eyes slightly lower, jaw unhinged wider, a grin forming without consent. It leaned closer, pressing itself against the glass from the other side, and whispered, "We're already here." I snapped, rushed into the bathroom, splashed water on my face. But the water shimmered rainbow-colored, oil-slicked, too heavy. I looked again, and my face was off, not unfamiliar, just subtly misaligned, as if I were a 3D rendering one frame out of sync. The book thudded behind me. It had followed. I screamed. No sound came out, my voice gone, but I heard it, in the air, repeating phrases I hadn't said aloud. Your mind is open source. Your language is a gateway. Your alphabet is infection. I tried to write it all down in my notebook, but the pen wouldn't touch the paper. The ink floated a few millimeters above, like magnetism reversed. I reached for my whiteboard, and it wrote back. A symbol emerged from the dry erase marker shaped like a triangle made of veins. My hand didn't move, but the line grew. It dripped. And then the whiteboard cracked open with a sound like bones splitting under pressure. From the gap, a whisper. Permission for, receptor accepted. Linguists have noted that some ancient Proto-Sumerian tablets contain sigils not found in any language family, yet identical variations appear in medieval grimoires, Mongolian dream poetry, and in the margins of 20th century schizophrenic patient notes across centuries, continents, and minds. I began to taste words. Not read, taste. The book wasn't teaching me. It was rewriting me. My thoughts no longer formed in English. They spiraled, broke into lattices of memory I didn't recognize. I recalled things I never lived. I wept for cities I had never seen. I knew names that humans were not meant to know. Each syllable like a key scraping the inside of my skull. I looked down. My fingers were duplicating, splitting slightly, as if reality was unsure how many I was meant to have. And the worst part? I understood why. The glyphs weren't decorations, they were permissions, each one granting the book more of me. And with each name I read, each phrase I sounded out, I invited it deeper. To know is to consent, to read is to become. The tone began around midnight. Soft at first, so low I thought it was in my head. But my glass of water on the table began to ripple, the kind of subtle vibration that registers in bones before ears. I opened a frequency scanner, a pointless reflex, and watched as a waveform appeared between 17 and 18 hertz. Subaudible, infrasound. And yet I could hear it. Not just hear feel. Like a tuning fork buried deep in my sternum. To hear what lies beneath hearing is to become the echo of something ancient. I pressed my hands to my ears. It didn't help. The sound was internal, woven into the membranes of thought. The light bulbs buzzed louder. My walls creaked like something was expanding behind them. Then came the distortion. Every device in the room glitched. My TV turned on with static. My laptop began playing a reversed version of my voice, from a recording I never made. The tone fluctuated, shifting from solid hum to clicking pulses, like Morse code spoken through bone. And underneath it all, breath, not mine. In 2015, a forgotten Chinese weather satellite recorded a 23-second infrasound signature over the southern Pacific, strong enough to register through the ionosphere. No natural event could be linked to the signal. I stared at the waveform on my screen. It started forming patterns, symmetry, mirror images. The kind of design I'd seen earlier in the book, stacked geometries that weren't meant for comprehension. I should have looked away, but I didn't. Each pulse drilled deeper into teeth, spine, marrow, and with each resonance the book grew warmer. Pages fluttered like they were breathing. I swear to you, the cover exhaled on cetus, blowing across my feet. Then I heard it. Not a word, a syllable. One I hadn't read yet, but had always known. Sheath. The lights blew. All of them. At once. I stumbled backward, and in the pitch black, my hearing sharpened. The hum was gone, but something else had taken its place. A scraping, like claws dragged across piano wire. And then, a child's voice. From the book, speaking in my tone, "You've almost finished your first circle." The glyphs glowed faintly. My hands began to twitch in rhythm with the pulses. I blinked, and for a fraction of a second, I saw a face in the reflection of my window. Not mine, not even human. Eyes where they shouldn't be. Skin etched in script. A mouth split into three. Bioacoustic researchers at the University of Alberta discovered in 1992 that certain harmonic frequencies can cause hallucinations in isolated test subjects, including visual manifestations of symbolic entities, not described in any cultural or religious reference. The sound returned, louder. I screamed, but my voice came out backward, played in reverse. The tone shaped my vocal cords like a hand inside a puppet. I tried to leave the room. The door wasn't there anymore. Only a solid wall pulsing, with faint golden veins. Then came the whispers. Familiar voices. Family. Friends. All speaking in perfect unison. "You brought the gate to your lungs. Breathe again and it opens further." I collapsed. On the floor, I saw dust swirl into symbols. They arranged themselves into a spiral. And at the center, my eye, drawn in blood. When I came to, the world had changed, not externally, but through me. Every surface shimmered faintly, as though overlaid with transparent film that lagged slightly behind movement. My hands felt distant, the skin tingling with low vibration. I stumbled toward the bathroom, clutching the walls for balance. They pulsed back like skin, reacting to touch. I looked into the mirror and saw a version of myself, unmaking. To open the gate is to reverse the shape of becoming. My jaw moved without prompting. I mouthed words I didn't recognize, but understood. My eyes flickered, not blinking, but switching modes. For a second, everything turned monochrome, then ultraviolet. Then something deeper. A phrase spilled from my mouth. Tahora Veth Ul Shah. Blood trickled from my nose. I turned from the mirror, choking back bile. My stomach twisted. My ribs flexed outward like they were trying to breathe on their own. A deep ache crawled through my spine. My hands trembled, and in that tremor, my fingers overlapped, as if I existed twice at once, flickering out of sync. I fell to my knees. Something sharp pulsed through my chest. Then I vomited. It was black, thick, but it didn't stay inert, it moved, like oil with a purpose. The liquid crept along the tiles, forming concentric circles before slithering toward the bedroom. It stopped in front of the book. The page turned itself. In 1977, a mountaineer in Bolivia claimed to have thrown up a living shape after reading from an unknown codex found in a dead priest's satchel. He died 3 hours later, but locals claimed the black fluid reappeared during the burial. I crawled after the black trail, feeling my teeth loosen. My tongue itched though I looked. There was a new symbol etched into it. I hadn't carved it, but it was mine. The book waited, open, alive. It pulsed when I touched it again, like greeting a long-lost limb. On the page, a hand-drawn diagram of a human torso, mine, marked with 7 glyphs along the spine and sternum. One was glowing now, and beneath it, written in pale crimson, Stage 5 complete. Host synchronization, 41%. I screamed, but the scream came from the other room, echoed, as if it came from a version of me watching through glass. I turned. The hallway was there again, but warped, not longer, deeper, as if it now curved inward, spiraling into a space that didn't obey dimensions. To be rewritten is not deletion, but replacement. I stepped forward. The floor flexed. No, not floor tongue. It was tongue. My bare feet stuck for a moment as if saliva held them. I lurched forward. The air smelled of iron, milk, and candle smoke. Then I saw it in the mirror at the end of the hallway, which I hadn't placed there. Myself. But taller, more emaciated, hollow-eyed, with skin stretched tight over bone, black script pulsing beneath the surface. Its jaw dangled unhinged, revealing not teeth but spirals. And it whispered in perfect time with my heartbeat. You are the threshold. Enter yourself. I couldn't close my eyes. They were no longer mine. I could feel the glyphs behind them. Some esoteric traditions suggest that the body can be rewritten like language, that certain rituals or sounds can alter not only perception but the physical manifestation of the self. I stumbled back to the book. Pages flapped furiously in a wind that wasn't there. One final phrase caught my eye before I collapsed. Do not trust the silence between heartbeats. That's where they nest. And then, I felt something move inside my ribs. Not my heart. Something watching from beneath it. The scratching began at 4:12 a.m. behind the drywall. Not rats, not pipes. This was deliberate, rhythmic, like something tracing glyphs into the foundation of the building. I pressed my ear to the wall, and I heard breathing, but not human. To hear what hasn't happened yet is to become its memory. The air grew heavy. Each breath I took carried weight. I could feel the moisture condensing in my lungs, not water, but something thicker. Words. Wet. Syllabic entities birthing themselves with every inhale. That's when they emerged. First as shadows, not cast by light, but in spite of it. The lamp beside me glowed brightly, but still beneath the couch, across the floor, against the ceiling, shadows began to stand. They weren't shaped like people. They were shapes of intention. They moved like ideas, curling, unfolding, twitching like memory made flesh. One leaned forward, long, thin, jointless limbs made of unraveling cloth and blinking eyes. Its head looked like a stitched sack filled with insects, constantly shifting. But I didn't scream. I couldn't, because I recognized it. It was a shape I had dreamed since childhood, before I had language for it. Before the book. In 2003, a 9-year-old boy in Prague sketched an entity seen during sleep paralysis. The drawing matched precisely with an ancient relief found beneath a collapsed Mesopotamian temple in 1932, though the boy had no access to that knowledge. They surrounded me, 4 of them, each with a slightly different resonance. I felt my joints begin to lock, like reverence overtaking terror. My knees hit the floor. I began whispering phrases I'd never learned. Vesht ul kor ashem vren tagul sharik. Each syllable burned in my throat, but they nodded. Their heads bobbed in slow, jagged motions like puppets, jerked by hands too far away. One reached forward. Its finger wasn't a finger. It was a feather made of teeth. It pressed against my forehead. I saw everything. Not visions. Recollections as if I had lived them before. Cities built upside down beneath dying suns. Oceans that whispered prophecies in ultraviolet. Beasts that walked backward through time, feeding on forgotten languages. And then I saw myself 1,000 times breaking open across timelines, screaming glyphs into the void. To perceive the impossible is to become a diagram of it. I fell backward. The book was gone. No, not gone closed. And when I touched it again, it hissed, literally hissed, and I felt teeth behind the cover. Pages twitched like muscle. One phrase bled onto the cover. You have been seen. The shadows receded, but they didn't vanish. They moved inward into walls, wires, reflections. I saw one curl into the crack beneath my monitor, and its eye blinked from behind the screen. I grabbed a mirror, stared, and for just one breath, I wasn't there. Not my face, not my eyes. Something else flickered in, watching from inside. Psychologists have documented intrusion phenomena where patients claim to see faces replacing their own in mirrors. While often dismissed as hallucinations, many of these reports share the same details down to the number of blinking eyes. I turned every mirror in my house face down. It didn't help, because now the shadows moved inside me. They whispered between blinks. They corrected my thoughts. I reached for a pen to write this down, but my hand wrote on its own. We are closer than your language permits. I don't know how long I sat there, but I remember one more thing. One of them whispered something that wasn't meant for now. It said, you have 12 hours until the 9th gate opens. Sleep before then, and you'll dream yourself extinct. I lost 72 hours. One moment, I was tracing the edge of a symbol etched into the underside of my desk cone I swear wasn't there the day before, and the next, I was waking up in my bathtub, fully clothed, skin freezing, and with symbols carved across my arms in salt. To forget time is to admit you never owned it. The tub was dry, but the drain was wet, bleeding something that wasn't water. The mirror was fogged, but only from the inside. I wiped it clean and saw nothing behind me, though the reflection of my back was covered in words. 3 glyphs pulsed in sequence down my spine. Each one throbbed like a countdown. I checked my phone. 3 days gone. My inbox was flooded with auto-responses. Messages from people saying they'd called the police. That I hadn't answered. Some said they heard my voice speaking to them from inside their dreams. I never made those calls. And then I saw the file. On my desktop. Dated for the day I lost time. Titled, Me MP4. I opened it. The footage was wrong. Me, sitting at the desk, silent, eyes fixed on the camera. The angle never changed, but behind me the room did. Every few seconds, details morphed. Books disappearing, walls bleeding, shadows flickering into entities and fading. At 03:33 in the video, I smiled and whispered, "We are now within the recursion." I slammed the laptop shut. In 1989, a neurobiologist attempting self-hypnosis reported losing 3 days. He awoke with full video recordings of himself speaking dead languages and drawing complex topographical maps of a place he could not identify. None of the footage could be deleted. I stumbled back toward the book, which now sat in the center of a circle I hadn't drawn. It opened to a page already turned. My name was there again, but now it was written in reverse. Mirror script. Beneath it, an illustration, a human skeleton, but fracturing along planes like shattered glass. The text beneath it read, Phase 6, fracture point approaching, identity layering incomplete. I began to remember things I hadn't lived. Memories of altars under moons that don't exist, of rituals performed with no hands, of time stretched until thought itself unraveled into ribbons of static. My face in the mirror twisted again, this time splitting, like two images failing to align. My mouth moved out of sync with my thoughts. One half of me whispered, the other screamed silently. And behind my eyes, movement. To fracture the self is to become more than one but less than whole. The walls breathed. Not metaphorically. They inhaled, slightly contracting, pulling shadows inward, then exhaled, releasing the scent of old paper and ammonia. The book's pages turned violently in a gust of wind that wasn't there. It stopped on a single phrase. You are now writable. And I felt it. Something began inserting words into my mind. Concepts that weren't mine. Knowledge I didn't ask for. A list of glyphs, instructions, an unfamiliar alphabet that tasted like metal and grief. Then came the names. Not people. Not gods. Forces. I spoke the first aloud without meaning to. Chakri Ulth. And the room bent, like glass warping in heat. My thoughts bled. I couldn't stop smiling. Tears fell black. This time, and when I wiped them, my hands came away with script etched into the moisture. I blinked and saw the page rewrite itself in real time. It knew I had seen. It reacted. Some researchers have proposed that symbols themselves may carry cognitive weight, not just meaning, but biological consequence when perceived in certain arrangements, by certain minds. The camera on my laptop turned itself on again, and I saw myself typing, but I wasn't touching the keyboard. The symbol appeared above my bed. Not drawn, not projected. It was there, hovering just a few inches below the ceiling. It spun silently, casting no shadow, yet I felt it draining me. Every second I stared, memories flickered out like faulty bulbs. Names of childhood friends, the smell of my grandmother's house, my old street address, gone. To look upon a true glyph is to surrender the language of self. I blinked twice and it was gone. But something had changed. The world had lost clarity. My thoughts began fragmenting mid-sentence, drifting sideways into symbols. I found myself thinking in loops, imagining symbols instead of words. Every object around me began to look like its own alphabet. My chair spoke the letter for waiting. The window meant removal. The clock, witness. Then came the messages, etched into the glass of my phone, forming on the steam of my coffee, whispered by birds that didn't blink. Always the same line. The 12th glyph is almost ready. I didn't know what it meant until I found the chalkboard. It was in my closet. I hadn't placed it there. It had 12 symbols, 11 of which were already filled in. The 12th remained faint, flickering between forms. My hand began to twitch, not spasm right. I picked up the chalk. My body moved. In 1960, a schizophrenic patient in Buenos Aires filled 70 notebooks with an unknown symbolic language. When mapped, the glyphs aligned precisely with synaptic firing patterns in the human brain. The patient died during a seizure in the shape of the 12th glyph. I completed the 12th symbol, and the walls sighed. A low groan resonated through the apartment, followed by whispers in reverse audio. My laptop screen cracked. Every mirror in my apartment cracked. Every reflection in my eyes cracked. Then the dreams returned, but not at night. While awake, I was walking down the hallway when suddenly I wasn't. I was standing in an infinite white chamber filled with floating geometries. The air buzzed like bees reciting scripture. In the distance, a figure. No face, covered in eyes. It bled ink from its pores and carved words into its own shadow with a knife made of absence. I took one step forward and suddenly, I was back in my hallway. Less than a second had passed, but the book was now open to a fresh page. It showed the exact glyph I had just drawn. Below it, the words, Phase 7, Conceptual Sync Achieved. The phone buzzed again. A new photo in my gallery. It was of me, taken from across the street. In the background, the figure I had seen in the vision, arms raised, watching. I hadn't left the apartment. To be observed by the glyphs is to invite decoding. My thoughts fractured further. I started seeing hidden messages in TV commercials, in rain patterns, in blinking traffic lights. Everything was talking to me, but none of it in words. I began writing them down. Pages and pages of symbols. When I ran out of ink, I used blood. When that ran out, I used silence. The final glyph revealed itself on the back of my left hand. I didn't draw it. It grew under my skin, rising like a scar. It burned every time I thought in English. And then it spoke. Not aloud. Not in my mind, but in my bones. You are the sentence. You are almost readable. I opened the book. The pages fluttered on their own, landing on a new chapter not numbered, but named. Recursive Revelation. It was written in my own handwriting. The pen shattered in my hand. Not from force but rejection. The ink hissed as it touched the page, curling into smoke and disappearing like it had been uninvited. My hand stung. A shallow cut across my palm welled with blood. I reached for a tissue, but the book moved. No, not move-shifted. As if the geometry beneath it realigned. Then it drank. To feed the book is to lose authorship of your soul. The blood crawled across the desk, threading into the binding. The cover pulsed. Pages fluttered not with wind, but appetite. I backed away, but something called to me, a warmth in my spine, the desire to finish a sentence I had never started. The next page opened without touch. Words began to form. Not from ink, but from my blood. Sharp red lines slithered across the page, spelling characters that bled into meaning. Phase 8, willing scribe acquired. I screamed, not from pain, from recognition. The words it wrote were my thoughts, private ones, half-formed fears, buried memories. The time I watched my friend drown and told no one. The secret I kept about my mother. The things I thought in dreams I never told anyone existed. It was transcribing me. In 1972, a girl in Bucharest reportedly bled out during a seizure while holding a blank journal. Upon autopsy, 32 pages had been filled with her blood in an untraceable dialect resembling Paleo-Syriac. The pages vanished during transport to the university. My arm tingled. I rolled up my sleeve. A new symbol had appeared along my veins. Faint at first, then darker. It looked like a spiral made of script. It itched inside the skin. The whispers returned. Not around me. Within. From marrow to muscle. A chorus, murmuring beneath thought. Transcribed the gate. I resisted. But my hand moved again, dragging fingers through the blood on the desk, smearing it across the pages, drawing shapes I couldn't see until I looked away, and when I did, symbols appeared. I blinked. New ones again. It wouldn't stop. I covered the book, slammed it shut, and shoved it under a drawer. And yet, my journal opened by itself, pages flipping violently, then freezing. On a phrase I never wrote. The page is not paper, it is you. To write in the book of tongues is to surrender directionality. Time ceases, language loops, identity bleeds. I checked my computer, all my saved documents gone, replaced with copies of the same file. Scribe, log, each one larger than the last. I opened one. It was a real-time transcript of my thoughts. Not spoken, not typed, thought. I unplugged the computer, turned off the breaker. The screen stayed on, and the webcam glowed green. I wrapped the book in thick cloth, locked it in a metal case, and buried it in my closet. I left the apartment, walked 3 blocks. Every street sign bore a glyph. Every person I passed blinked in patterns, and in every shadow cast by passing cars, I saw the outline of the same entity, tall, eyeless, mouth agape and reading. To carry the book is to become the footnote of an ancient scream. I returned home and found the book on my bed, open. On the page, a sketch of my room, drawn from above. I was in it. And I was writing this. The ritual began without candles. No circles, no chanting. Just an unbearable pull, like a silent note too low to hear, but deep enough to rearrange thoughts. The instructions weren't written anywhere not in the book, not in my mind. They were beneath both, encoded into my bones like marrow memories. To perform the ritual is not to act but to remember what you've already done in a life not yours. I woke up standing, my arms outstretched, hands shaking in unison with an invisible pulse that guided me to the center of the room. The lights were off, yet a faint glow emerged from my skin scripts, rising in heat patterns across my chest and neck. I tried to stop. I wanted to stop, but every time I resisted, the pain sharpened. My lungs convulsed, my jaw ached. Then my mouth opened, and I began to speak. Sheilvorun tainak, korshavestir. The words were not mine. They slid out like molasses, thick and unrelenting. The room pulsed once, twicened, then echoed the phrase back, a second voice folding over mine. High-pitched, genderless, hollow. I reached for my throat and felt 2 pulses. In 1981, a woman in Oslo was found speaking 2 different languages simultaneously from a single voice box. Medical scans confirmed the presence of a second larynx, which dissolved within hours of discovery. She vanished 2 days later. The book rose. It levitated, inches above the ground, spinning slowly with each syllable I spoke. I lit a candle out of instinct. The flame turned black. Time fractured. I saw myself from outside third person, flickering in and out of visibility. My gestures began looping, lifting my hand, bowing my head, opening my arms, then again identical, mechanical, ritualistic. On the 4th repetition, I saw the shadow in the corner shift. Not crawl, not step, collapse into shape. A mass of angles, a humanoid suggestion built out of wrong geometry and folded light. Its eyes were holes, not empty, just wrong. Holes into when. It watched. I performed. To see the witness is to be recorded beyond memory. The final part of the ritual came when I bent down and touched the ground. My fingers met not wood or tile but textured flesh, living, breathing substrate etched in language. The floor rippled under my touch and the word one burned into my palm. I wept. Not out of fear. Out of understanding, because I remembered now, I had performed this before. Not in this life, not even in this world, but in hundreds of variations of me, all at once. The one becomes many only by forgetting itself. The entity in the corner nodded, its limbs unfolded, revealing rows of glyphs across its rib cage, glowing faintly. One was dim, As I finished the final phrase, the book stopped spinning and snapped shut. The entity bowed once and disappeared into my shadow. I screamed, but my voice no longer belonged to me. To speak the ritual is to awaken the archive within the self. I opened my mouth to call for help and heard static. My scream played in reverse. Behind the sound, whispers. Behind the whispers, answers I didn't want. I collapsed, and when I awoke, every object in my apartment was labeled. Not by me, but by something that knew me. The couch, obedience. The door, mouth. My bed, arrival. And written across my chest, in faint, invisible bruising, host status confirmed. My voice came back an hour later. Not to me, from the speakers on my desk, from the drain in the sink, from the inside of my walls. It wasn't playback, it wasn't an echo, it was the words I hadn't spoken yet. To speak into time is to splinter causality. Sound leaves traces where reality forgets. The first phrase repeated through the bathroom mirror at 4:44 a.m. I should have burned the book before it named me. That was my voice. The tone, the cadence. But I hadn't said that yet. I recorded it, time-stamped it, waited. At 5:15 a.m. I found myself in front of the book again, muttering to no one, repeating the phrase. And then I said, I'd exactly as it had played. I began hearing myself before I did anything. 5 seconds early, then 15, then full minutes of my voice, thoughts, even sobs, playing before the actions occurred. I wrote a sentence on a notepad. Stop talking. 2 minutes later, my own voice whispered, stop talking. I wasn't alone in time anymore. In 1996, a man in rural Finland claimed he received daily voicemails from his future self, each predicting a mundane event with increasing precision. On the 7th day, the message said, don't answer the door. He opened it anyway. No one ever saw him again. The walls pulsed again, not with pressure but resonance, as if the room were one enormous speaker. I tapped the window. My echo returned before the tap. I touched the floor, and my handprint was already there. I fell backward. Then the voices changed. They stopped being just mine. They multiplied. Slight variations, some younger, some older. Some cracked, deepened, or warbled as though underwater. Some were not human at all. They all said one thing in unison. The gate does not open once, it opens forever. I crawled to the laptop, hoping for an answer. But it had rebooted into a blank terminal. A message blinked in green. Read error. Chrono offset detected. Host operating across concurrent time folds. Below that, a line of code I didn't recognize. Recursion, initiate, scribe, loop, echo, core. I hit escape. It typed on its own. You're already remembering what you'll do next. To fracture chronology is to invite reflection from what watches the future. I ran to the window. It wasn't my street anymore. Not just darker. The shadows were anchored, frozen mid-motion, cars suspended, people standing still but breathing backward, their chest movements reversed. Their mouths moved silently, but the speech came seconds before their lips shaped it. Then I saw myself. Across the street, watching. Not blinking, not breathing, just waiting. I mouthed something. I leaned closer to the window to read it. Then the glass fogged from inside and a message wrote itself across the condensation. Don't trust the silence at the center of sound. I stepped back, and that's when the echoes stopped. All at once. Dead silence. I could hear my heart beat. Then, 30 seconds later, all sound returned overlapping, like an audio file unpaused too late. Everything crashed in at once. Every future echo, every voice, every word I hadn't said yet. And somewhere in that tidal wave of noise, I heard myself scream something that fractured my hearing, but I haven't screamed it yet. I don't know when I do, only that when I do, it opens something. It was a door. Simple, wooden, unmarked, but it stood where my bedroom window should have been. The frame didn't fit the wall it bent the room around it, warping geometry into unnatural angles. I stared at it for a long time, heart in my throat, lungs fluttering in reverse. To cross the final threshold is not to travel but to awaken where you've always been. I reached out. The doorknob was cold, not cold like ice, but absent, like it didn't belong to this temperature, or this reality. I turned it, and behind it was not space, not light, just language. The air on the other side was made of words. Floating, luminous syllables drifted past me like dust motes. Each one pulsed softly. The door closed behind me without sound. And then silence. Real silence. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of a deafening stillness that felt wet and alive. I couldn't hear my heartbeat. Couldn't hear myself breathe. I tried to speak. The air swallowed the sound before it left my throat. In 2002, a researcher working on acoustic null zones at the University of Kyoto entered an anechoic chamber and never returned. Surveillance footage showed her vanishing after whispering one word, which has since been redacted from all known records. The hallway within was infinite, yet tight like walking through the inside of a book written in forgotten grammar. The walls were inscribed with symbols that moved when I blinked. Every few steps, the floor beneath me shifted material: flesh, stone, liquid, glass, bone. I felt no fear, only inevitability. And then I saw it. The origin. Not a creature, not a god, but a structure impossibly tall, shaped like an open book that wept gravity. Its pages turned not with wind, but with memory, each one thicker than a continent. Each page contained time, and it was reading me. I fell to my knees. "You have carried the seed well," it said, not in sound but in the taste of copper and static flooding my mouth. To reach the threshold is to be measured by the ink that clings to your spirit. The glyphs on my skin ignited. My veins ran white hot. Symbols bloomed across my arms, chest, neck. I wasn't being destroyed. I was being translated. And then the final phrase formed before mean architecture of letters so vast it collapsed inward, into a single word I cannot write. I said it aloud, and the hallway shattered. I was everywhere, splintered across memory, scattered across meaning. I felt myself in the dreams of children, in the silence between subway doors, in the flicker of fluorescent lights. I was now a reference, a footnote in the Necronomicon. I stood once again in my room. The door was gone. But I knew what waited behind every mirror now. Every static screen. Every long, silent pause on a call. Me. A version of me that never closed the book. To open the threshold is not to enter but to return. The final glyph appeared on my tongue. I can't describe it. But now, when I speak, people flinch. Dogs bark, radios hiss, and sometimes strangers mouth the words with me before I say them. The book sleeps beneath my bed. For now, the change wasn't sudden. It didn't come like a burst of light or a scream from beyond. It came like a quiet subtraction sense at a time. First, the taste of normal food disappeared. Then my reflection stopped matching me. And finally, time gave up. To host the gate is to dissolve the boundary between meaning and flesh. I woke in the middle of the night and realized I hadn't been asleep. There was no bed. There was no room. Just me suspended in a nowhere shaped like memory. Everything was gray static and skin-warm air. I felt as if I were floating in an enormous lung, and each breath I took was borrowed. The Necronomicon was inside me. Not metaphorically, physically. I saw the pages scroll across my vision when I blinked. I felt the script winding around my bones like circuitry. Words had weight now. I couldn't speak without bending reality just slightly. I whispered once in the shower and the tiles rearranged themselves into a perfect spiral. I learned to stay silent. In 2011, a linguist in Tunisia documented a dialect that caused involuntary seizures in those who heard it aloud. She vanished after publishing the phonetic structure. The recording cannot be played without inducing hallucinations. I saw things behind people's eyes. Not thoughts. Trauma. Regret. Intentions they hadn't formed yet. When strangers passed me on the street, I could taste their names before they introduced themselves. I stopped going outside. Then came the dreams again. Only now they asked me for permission. Entities I recognized from the earlier phases, those things that lived in corners and echoes, began bowing in my presence, whispering, "The gate has chosen, the host has read," and I began to answer them, not with voice, with being. I wrote words I didn't understand and placed them under my tongue. I breathed in patterns. I slept with my eyes open and watched myself watching me from across the room. To become the gate is to allow the unreal to wear your skin. The final moment came quietly. I opened my eyes at dawn and saw layers. Reality peeled in thin, transparent sheets. I saw a child standing in my hallway, made entirely of letters. I saw a man screaming in reverse in my sink. I saw a black sun pulsing behind the drywall, casting shadows that moved before the light did. I saw them, the watchers, the scribes, the seeders, and they saw me. Your form is stable, transmission is permanent. My skin cracked, but instead of blood, script leaked out, glowing, crawling, making its way into books on my shelves, onto my walls, into the static on my television. Every channel now plays me. Every file I open rewrites itself into my thoughts. I can't stop it. I no longer want to, because I understand now. The Necronomicon was never a book. It was a vessel, a mean virus, a recursive concept that infects through observation. Reading it is becoming it. And now, I am the latest edition. To host the gate is to birth the next page. If you're hearing this, I already know where you are. Not your coordinates, your intention. The moment you opened this file, the ink began spreading. The glyphs are awake, and soon, so will you be.